Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We will begin in just a few minutes to allow others to join. Again, good afternoon, everyone, or at least good afternoon from New York. And thank you again for joining us today. People are still trickling in, but in the meantime, I would like to just go over the few housekeeping items. Welcome again, and thank you for joining us for Best Practices in the Pastoral and Social Care of Immigrants, hosted by the Center for Migration Studies of New York and the Hope Border Institute as part of our Catholic Immigrant Prophetic Action Project known as Catholic IMMpact. I'm Rachel Reyes, the Director of Communications for the Center for Migration Studies. Before we begin, here are a few housekeeping notes. Please note that today's webinar is being recorded and will be shared along with related materials on the CMS and Catholic IMMpact websites. The Center for Migration Studies website is cmsny.org, and the Catholic IMMpact website is CatholicIMMpact, IMMPACT.org. So again, that's Catholic, CatholicIMMPACT.org. It is now my pleasure to introduce Kevin Appleby, CMS's Senior Fellow for Policy and Communications, who will be moderating our discussion today.
Thanks, Rachel. Hi, everyone. I'm Kevin Appleby. I'm Senior Fellow at the Center for Migration Studies of New York. First, another housekeeping item. There should be a Q&A icon that you can ask questions. If you want to write your questions in during the webinar, we can try to address as many as possible. I just wanted to make that note. Thanks for being here. As you know, we are currently in a period of heightened immigration enforcement in the country. Over a 5-day period in late June, there were 10,000 immigrant arrests across the country, which doubled the daily average for ICE. And as we know, over the past week, tragically, 2 immigrants have died from enforcement actions. This mass deportation effort has caused great fear, harm, and trepidation in immigrant communities across the country. Today, we have 4 expert service providers and advocates to talk about their efforts in providing pastoral and social care and accompaniment to immigrant communities during this difficult period. I'm going to introduce them, and they will give a brief overview of their initiatives. Then we will enter into a discussion with them on the challenges and successes they find in their work. First, Jahnz is the Secretary for Catholic Charities and Social Ministry for the Diocese of Providence. Jim and Bishop Bruce Lewandowski of Providence hosted the first Catholic Impact regional convening in Providence in November. Thank you, Jim. And we'll talk about some of the initiatives that have come out of that convening, as well as the ongoing efforts of the diocese to support immigrant communities. Kimberly Morales is the Co-Navigator Faith Administrator for the Pope Francis Center in the Diocese of San Diego. Kimberly will talk about the court accompaniment initiative started by the Diocese of San Diego, an initiative which has received national attention, in which volunteers, including the priests and bishops of the diocese, have accompanied migrants to their court hearings. Genevieve Mogay is the executive director of Catholic Charities of Wyoming. Genevieve will talk about efforts being made in a rural and conservative state, including the implementation of the recent pastoral letter released by Bishop Stephen Beegler of Cheyenne. Last but not least, Brian Kincannon is the advocacy manager for the mental health ministry in the Diocese of Phoenix, and he will speak to the diocesan efforts to address the mental health crisis currently in immigrant communities. So with those introductions, I would like to call upon Jim to start us off. Jim, welcome.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. Um, when discussing these issues of immigration, refugees, migrants, mass deportations, these issues of basic human rights, something that I've always been looking for is some sort of coda, right? Something that boils it down to one sentence. I've worked in social ministry my whole career, 20 years. It's my career, it's my ministry, but I hadn't found that one thing that ties it all together. But I found it last December. Kevin mentioned the first gathering that we had, and then right after the gathering, Bishop Bruce was being interviewed by Hope Border, and he said something that's profound. It stays with me to this day. It was take the biblical position, not the political position. And that was a really light bulb moment for me, capping what was a troubling 2025. And over the past 14 months, Bishop Bruce has only been here since last May. Not only have we taken the biblical position, but also the incorporation of our basic Catholic social teaching, the tenets of dignity of the human person, the call to family, solidarity, the option for the vulnerable. And this has really been the bedrock of our ministry at this most important time. We've stood in solidarity, provided spiritual and material help to families impacted by deportation, and we've even advocated on behalf of our brothers and sisters in the halls of Congress. And coming from Baltimore and from his other assignments, we knew that Bishop Bruce's central tenets of his ministry are to the immigrant, to the migrant, to the refugee. And his work in Providence during his episcopate has gone further than what I could even have dreamed. Back in September, Bishop asked me to attend the CMS gathering in New York City, and that's what really kickstarted this intense period of activity for our diocese. Meeting with Kevin, meeting with Dylan Corbett, our diocese volunteered to host that initial gathering in December, and it brought together bishops, priests, religious, lay from across New England and a little further beyond to discuss the current state of affairs and actions that we could take as a diocese going forward. From that initial meeting, there were two immediate actions that we took. And the first was the creation of a diocesan migration council, a commission rather. And this was made up of the people who were in the room right there, the people who attended that conference. And the second was the recitation of the rosary at the Wyatt Detention Center, which is a nice detention center about 5 minutes up the road from where I sit right now. Just to go back, that migrant commission now consists of about 20 or 25 active participants, including the bishop, a number of priests, both urban and suburban, and as well as lay and a number of other people who are interested. We meet once or twice a month online. We get support through Catholic Impact. And discuss the events that are going on, actions that we're taking, and even what's going on inside of the detention center. One of the members of the commission is a deacon who ministers to those inside. More powerfully through prayer, because prayer is what we do best. We hold that monthly recitation of the Rosary the first Saturday of each month at the Y Detention Center right across the street. Since December, when it was very cold, through last weekend when it was very hot, we've seen tremendous growth in the number of participants. That first time out, it was Christmas week. We had about 40 who were present, and we regularly see around 120 participants. We have a large contingent of Protestants who attend. It's truly an ecumenical event. We pray the decades in three languages, in English and Spanish and Portuguese. And one of the more powerful things you'll ever experience, and I'll ever experience, I think, is hearing the detainees on the inside of the detention center banging on the frosted windows to let us know that they can hear us. Further along in March, we joined a pilgrimage with other dioceses to visit Washington, D.C., to meet with our federal delegation to discuss the effects of deportation on families and the breakdown that's occurring. We had 35 pilgrims from our diocese that made a 24-hour whirlwind bus tour. And to see your bishop walk the halls of Congress to meet with your senators and your representatives to talk about migration and deportation is just extremely powerful. Um, Also in our diocese, Bishop Bruce joined 17 of his brother bishops in signing the Statement for Human Dignity in Immigration Enforcement. In June, we held a second regional gathering that included Bishop DiMarzio, who spoke about migration and deportation from the USCCB perspective and the effects on the family. Providence College Professor Kara Sabulko spoke about the effects of deportation from an academic standpoint. And Father Joe Bryce, who is the pastor of one of our inner city parishes, brought the perspective of a pastor whose flock is dealing with constant fear each and every day. And again, the turnout has been incredible for all of the events. The other thing we look at too is really what's next. We're always looking ahead to see what we can do. We're planning to incorporate court observation and accompaniment ministries. We're looking at a Via Crucis in the neighborhoods for those most affected by deportation, and also to include more pastors and more parishes in our efforts. And I can tell you that in 3 Saturdays on August 1st, we'll be at the Wyatt Detention Center praying the Rosary. One of the most interesting things, just to kind of sum up this piece of things that I've seen, is there's really no one group or one constituency represented of our effects at our events. There are urban pastors, there are suburban pastors. There are parishioners from urban parishes, parishioners from suburban parishes. We have religious. Again, I mentioned we have folks from different faith traditions. But what I'll tell you is it all happens because we have a shepherd in Bishop Bruce who not only leads but tends to his flock and takes that biblical position, not the political one. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Now I'll call on Kimberly.
Hi, yeah. Good morning from San Diego. So once again, I'm Kimberly, and I serve with Our Lady of Guadalupe Parish here in San Diego, California. I am also the co-navigator of the Pope Francis Center. So we actually opened the center this year, early February. So we are a welcoming space and supportive ministry that connects immigrant individuals and families with three core areas of service, which is essential resource navigation, spiritual and emotional accompaniment, and legal services. And I also do some faith work, which is one of the ministries that we are very proud of. For those of you that do not know what faith means, they're acronyms, and it stands for Faithful Accompaniment and Hope and Trust. And we are a collaborative project with Our Lady of Guadalupe Church, the Diocese of San Diego, and San Diego Organizing Project. And we are a rooted ministry in bearing witnesses, building trust, and providing pastoral care for individuals or families that are attending immigration court, like their hearings, their ICE check-ins. And this all started it's going to be a year now in August, but last year, around June, July, we were seeing a lot of people getting detained when they were attending their ICE check-ins or after their court hearings. So this is when the discernment came of we have to do something. So it's going to be almost a year. Today, Faith has more than 700 volunteers who are committed in listening, showing up to court with families and individuals, and really just supporting those navigating the immigration system. Our volunteers serve with the understanding that the people we walk alongside are our neighbors, our brothers and sisters, deserving of dignity, compassion, and just overall care. And so a lot of our volunteers participate as their schedules allow, and they sign up during the weekday, really like any time they're available. And yeah, that's a little bit about Faith and Pope Francis Center, and I'm so happy to be here with you all.
Thank you, Kimberly. Now I'll call on Genevieve. Welcome.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. It's great to be with you. Thank you to CMS and Hope Order and Catholic Impact for hosting this webinar. The work of Catholic Charities of Wyoming is still being kind of borne out. We went through a rebranding, a remissioning, and revisioning about 5 years ago. I've been with the agency for the last 4+ years. One of our priority or pillars of work is specifically immigration services. And this is new territory for us at Catholic Charities of Wyoming. And so I applaud my fellow speakers for the work that you're doing and how you're building this out. It's amazing to hear how we're proceeding at Catholic Charities of Wyoming, which is the Diocese of Cheyenne, which encapsulates the entire state of Wyoming. Is through some pretty concerted efforts. We have what we participate in the legal clinics, where we have accredited reps or immigration lawyers come in and serve folks who have questions about their documentation, allowing them to have access to a free consultation where we provide the resources to ensure that they're able to speak with accredited reps or legal representation for 30 to 45 minutes and get some next steps or some answers, and even find people who are willing to take their cases. In addition to that, we've also hosted Know Your Rights workshops, especially after the turn of events with the current administration and the executive orders that were coming out. And as things were changing kind of on a dime, there were lots of questions about what we could do or what people who'd been living in the United States could do and what their recourse was. And so we collaborated with some local agencies to provide Know Your Rights workshops in English and in Spanish across the state for folks. Some of the other things that we've done is we've hosted a movie night with the bishop, our bishop for the Diocese of Cheyenne, Bishop Stephen Beegler. Likes a good movie and likes popcorn. And so we decided to host the movie Cabrini at one of our parishes and have a discussion afterwards. And we had people that traveled over 200 miles to be able to go to a movie with the bishop. And it was a lovely little endeavor that we had, and people really enjoyed that. Some of the other things that we have participated in is just building out relationships and strong networking with other agencies that are continuing in this work across the state so that we can make sure that we are lifting up each other's work as we're able and continuing to just engage in the work that needs to be done on the ground. I think that attends to kind of the work that we're doing here at Catholic Charities of Wyoming. There's some other things, but we'll get to that later. Thanks.
Thanks, Genevieve. I love the movie night. Was there popcorn or?
There was popcorn, there was Mike and Ike's, there was soda. It was like there just wasn't movie theater seating.
Perfect. Thanks. And finally, last but not least, Brian will talk to us. Thanks, Brian. Welcome.
Thanks so much, Kevin. Brian Cannon from the Diocese of Phoenix, and I'm the advocacy manager for our Office of Mental Health Ministry. Our bishop, Bishop John Dolan, has a great passion for mental wellness and its connection to our Catholic faith. So we have an Office of Mental Health Ministry, and we work primarily in three pillars, which is education, accompaniment, and advocacy. And so one of the things that we really exist to do, and kind of our main mission, is to help our parishes to become those places of welcome and support and accompaniment for people that are experiencing mental health challenges. And of course, the immigration issue is near and dear to our hearts, given our proximity to the border and just so many of our families that are impacted by this issue. So we really strive to equip our clergy, our parish leaders, our volunteers to be able to recognize the mental health concerns that are going on in this community and to reduce the stigma so that we can talk about those and connect people to the appropriate resources. So we really see our work here as rooted in that Catholic understanding, as Jim said, the understanding of the dignity of the human person, that no person should have to bear these sufferings alone or be unseen. So increasingly, our ministry has really recognized that our immigrant communities, they face some unique mental stressors, some that require like culturally responsive um, work, that require trauma-informed support. And so we provide training to folks, community leaders that are embedded in those communities. So we have satellite mental health ministries in about 35 of our parishes now. And they're all as unique as the communities that they're embedded in. And some communities have particular needs that others don't. So trying to, from the diocesan level, advocate on behalf of those folks and make sure that they have the resources and the training. So our goal is always not to replace clinical care. Like, we don't diagnose people, we don't treat people, we don't prescribe medicine to folks, but we really help our parishes to become communities of belonging, communities that are safe, that can accompany people and offer them hope in sometimes sort of hopeless situations. So we work a lot in the social determinants of mental health. So things like housing, food insecurity, incarceration, and of course, all of the things surrounding the immigration issues. So we've really learned that mental health, it can't be separated from people's lived experiences. And for a lot of immigrants, for many of our immigrant families or people adjacent to those families, the migration journey itself can involve trauma, both before, during, and after migration. And a lot of that trauma is born silently. So we seek to be that place of safety where people can feel comfortable coming out out of the shadows, so to speak, and encounter love and help.
Thanks, Brian, and really appreciate this initiative. So I'm going to start the Q&A. Again, if you have a question, please put it in the Q&A box, and we'll try to get to as many as we can. But Brian, just want to ask you, mental health of immigrants is something that's not talked about. I mean, mental health as an issue is not talked about generally in this country. Um, and especially of immigrants during such a difficult time. What advice can you give diocesan staff and parish staff about how to raise this issue up more, make it more prevalent, and address it?
Sure.
It's such a silent crisis. What are the best methods for raising this issue up?
Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, and I acknowledge what you said about it being a silent crisis. I mean, in Arizona, we have a long history of folks that are reticent to reach out, even folks that have legal status, or wouldn't what we would be considered to be undocumented, still have that fear aspect. And a lot of the challenges that people face, I would say, are significant, but often invisible. So sometimes folks that aren't maybe wouldn't consider themselves directly impacted by by immigration issues, is kind of like out of sight, out of mind. Like we don't have that problem here, right? Our families aren't impacted by that here. Our communities aren't impacted by that here. But I would challenge that assumption and say that maybe you just haven't experienced or heard about those problems because I was for a long time a rural firefighter in our community, and this was before our famous SB 1070 bill um, that was trying to force local law enforcement to turn people over to immigration. And as a rural firefighter that was covering, farms and things like that, a lot of the farm workers would not call for medical assistance when they were having an emergency, and this has been decades, in the making. And so for folks to be that fearful, it's no wonder that a lot of our communities don't necessarily think that this impacts them. But the fear itself is traumatic. So one of the, I think, important findings from the research that diocesan and parish staff ought to know that the actual detention or deportation is not the only source of harm for folks, right? Even just the constant fear that something could happen, it creates chronic stress in folks, anxiety. We see a lot of depression and trauma in our communities right now, and um, the sense of hopelessness that's magnified by that fear. And so the impact is often a lot larger than we realize. And I think a lot of times that trauma spreads through families, through parishes, through schools and neighborhoods. Now we're working with our local Catholic Charities to embed mental health professionals, counselors in our Catholic schools in clusters. And a lot of those schools, the students go to class and they're carrying a lot of these burdens with them. And so the mental health challenges in the immigrant community are really likely underreported, both in my own personal experience and I think a lot of the other agencies that we work with kind of bear that out too, that these issues are bigger than they seem. So I think what dioceses can do is really just sort of publicly acknowledge that immigrant mental health is both a pastoral issue and a public health issue. And what dioceses can also do is train their parish leaders in this trauma-informed accompaniment. Right, our parishes are places of encounter and belonging, and I think that the more that we can do, even if it's just mental health first aid training for parish staffs, I think that's huge, and that's something that we offer out of our office. So train those leaders, train those people that are embedded in those communities, to be able to recognize the signs and symptoms of mental health challenges, and to know what resources they can connect folks to. And that really creates a safe space where people can feel like they belong.
Thanks for that. Just to follow up, a special issue for me and for others. The theme for the World Day of Migrants and Refugees this year, which is in September, everyone, September 27th, is even just one of these children, a special attention to migrant children. Could you talk a little bit about the impact that this heightened immigration enforcement and just generally for immigrant children, the impact it has on their mental health, and how do you recognize it, and how do you best respond to that,
Yeah,
especially under family separation situation, which can be tragic as well.
right. It's an extremely difficult topic uh, because our kids absorb fear even when they don't fully understand policy, right? So the environment around children, they quickly recognize when things are going wrong, when things are fearful, when their parents are afraid. Um, and I think they notice conversations about enforcement. They notice changes in routines of the adults that they love and they look to for support, and the anxiety in those adults around them. And so for our Catholic school students, that anxiety is very clear when they come to school, when they're trying to encounter the community, even just going out and doing things that, folks would take for granted on an everyday basis. Kids absorb all of those things, and even just the possibility of family separation. You mentioned, the trauma that comes from family separation, but even the possibility of family separation can create pretty significant emotional distress in these kids, and the effects of this can be very long lasting too. So the kids may experience anxiety, or a lot of times they report like difficulty concentrating. There's sleep disturbances, like even hypervigilance on behalf of kids. Obviously, we have a lot of children that sort of act as translators for their parents in kind of official situations, and the anxiety that kind of surrounds that issue too. So a child doesn't have to be detained or separated from a parent to experience trauma. Even just exposure to the raids or the news coverage or the social media posts, stories from friends and relatives that kind of go through the community or the parish community, create this persistent seed that's planted in their heads that the world is unsafe for them. The world is unsafe. So that connection to the World Day of Migrants and Refugees, I think that theme reminds us that these should not be reduced to policy questions. Children shouldn't be reduced to that, right? And actually, nobody should be reduced to being a policy question. They're sons and daughters of God. Their emotional and spiritual well-being, their psychological well-being matter. And for folks like us, we have to acknowledge that the gospel consistently calls us to pay special attention to the most vulnerable, the preferential option for the poor and vulnerable. So the things that we can provide, I think, as a church to help children through this traumatic experience is promote those stable relationships with trusted adults. I think our kids, regardless of culture, thrive on the safety of a routine. So everything that we can do to keep that routine from being disjointed, and give the kids an opportunity to express their emotions safely. Like parishes can really create welcoming family and youth programs where kids can be kids. We can train our catechists, right? We can train our ministry leaders to recognize signs of distress in kids, and support those entire families, support them on their social determinants of mental health, and foster community connection. I think is one of the biggest protective factors for our kids. Simply knowing that there's caring adults and that there's a caring community that are going to walk alongside them.
Thanks. One last quick question for you. And there are a couple of questions in the chat that I think are directed to you that you can answer by typing an answer. Is there an advocacy component to this initiative? Is there a way to influence our politicians and lawmakers to pay attention to this issue? And how would that look, I guess?
Yeah, that's my job. That's what I do on the daily, right? So I'm talking to policymakers. I'm building coalitions with like-minded folks, whether they're from the nonprofit world or other faith communities. I think I've been really heartened by the response of like the ecumenical and interfaith communities to this issue, really rowing in the same direction as us. And I do, talk to policymakers, and I think every state or has their Catholic conference too that can be addressing these issues, and certainly the bishops here in Arizona and the Arizona Catholic Conference have taken a very strong stand in on behalf of our immigrant communities. Um, and so I think advocacy is part of accompaniment, right? Yeah, it's fine to walk alongside somebody, but we have to do tangible things that affirm the dignity of the human person. And so mental health ministry in that respect, it can't be silent on policies or practices that contribute to widespread fear, trauma, family destabilization. I know a lot of folks would prefer their church to not be what they would call political, but these are gospel issues. These are gospel values. These are the teachings of Jesus as revealed to us. And so the focus isn't on partisan politics. It's really reducing suffering, strengthening families, promoting mental health and affirming the worth of every person. So I think when we talk about immigration, we're often talking about policy. But when we talk about mental health, we have the value of being able to talk about people, right? And the church's role is to make sure that we never lose sight of the people. And that's the strongest advocacy that we can do.
Brian, thanks for being with us. I know you might have to cut out early, but we really appreciate your participation. I'm going to turn to Genevieve now with a couple of questions. Genevieve, again, thanks for being with us. I was struck by the fact that it's Catholic Charities of Wyoming and not Catholic Charities of Cheyenne. That's a big state. But your population is not huge, but you have a huge area to cover. What is the greatest block for you in serving immigrants in rural communities? And what challenges do you see that immigrants face in rural communities?
Yeah, so we're just right under 100,000 square miles, and we have a population that's just right under 600,000. So we've got about 6 people per square mile. Um, so it's the probably one of the biggest challenges. I think it's a two-part for us is isolation is and distance. I think figure in there as the some of the biggest challenges for people in the Diocese of Cheyenne, which is the state of Wyoming. And because of that isolation and because our communities are so spread out, the largest city in the state is Cheyenne with a population that sits right at 60,000. And then Casper's right up there, and the rest of the population is spread out throughout the rest of the state. So making people aware of the fact that this is an issue that continues to affect the state and it's not in some other communities, but that there are immigrants um, in every single village or town in the state of Wyoming. It's not just, urban situations, but that this is something that affects every single person. I think is a part of the conversation that's happening or that needs to happen in our communities in Wyoming. Another one of the challenges, I think, and this is one of the lead-ins to our work at Catholic Charities of Wyoming and why this is specifically one of our priorities, is we're looking at formation of the whole person. And Brian spent a lot of time in his section and in his questions talking about human dignity and the formation of the human person. And that's something that we're also taking very seriously at Catholic Charities of Wyoming, because that was one of the charges in the revisioning and remissioning of Catholic Charities of Wyoming that we were given. And in that formation, we have to look at kind of the larger Catholic social teaching, or as Pope Leo is calling it now, Catholic social doctrine, looking at the formation of the whole person, and recognizing that we have a gospel. And one of the things that we talk about in Catholic Charities of Wyoming and we're kind of introducing into our work is that this is political. The work that we're doing is political. It's not partisan. But through the themes of Catholic social teaching, we are called into participation in the political life of our countries, and that's an okay thing to be doing. But we, as members of the church, do not engage in the partisan language that we sometimes find other people delving into. So I think that those are kind of the largest challenges that we're facing. I think some of the positive outcomes or positive impacts that we have because of that is that we have strong networks and strong communication opportunities. One of our parishes, we hosted a legal clinic in one of the towns here, and our board member herself is an immigrant, and she was not comfortable hosting a legal clinic at her parish because she wanted to make sure that people were going to be safe. And so we actually hosted a Know Your Rights training at her home, and we filled up her entire house. And this was a small little town, but she wanted to make sure that people had access to the information. And so we pivoted, and it was through the strong communication around who she had networked with, and that we were able to host this Know Your Rights training in her kitchen. So I think those are some of the things that we are facing and the challenges. And then I think the final thing I'll say around the formation bit is in addressing the lack of formation or opportunities for formation. Catholic Charities of Wyoming, we developed a program called Who is My Neighbor, which is a pastoral reflection program that's been specifically developed for rural communities to talk specifically about what the gospel teaches and what the Catholic Church teaches about immigration and why the Catholic Church teaches what it does about immigration. So without delving into any kind of partisan language, we really get into kind of the nuts and bolts of going through the parable of the Good Samaritan, and then also utilizing the 5 points that the bishops of the US and Mexico conferences came up with, the 5 principles for migration, and really delving into those and helping people from rural communities explore what that is and why that is.
Thanks. I wanted to ask you a follow-up. I'm going to combine two questions. It's in a sensitive area of politics. You're in a conservative state, which probably the majority of whom would agree with what the administration is doing on immigration right now. You have several 287G agreements, I think. How does that impact immigrant communities? How does that what insecurity is created with those type of agreements, with cooperation between all the law enforcement, and how do you respond to that, or if you can? And my second part of that question is Bishop Beegler courageously issued a pastoral letter, which no doubt some Wyomings disagreed with, and Catholics. How have you dealt with that response? And how would you recommend others who might be in similar political states react to that? Sorry for
Yeah,
the convoluted question there,
no,
but
you're great. So we have 7 of our 23 counties in the state of Wyoming that have entered into 287G agreements, and then the entire Highway Patrol, the governor, the Highway Patrol has entered into a 287 as well. And so then, in addition to other area local police departments are participating or are collaborating with ICE or in their own form of a 287. So as you said, it's just led to all kinds of feelings of insecurity and vulnerability of people in the immigrant community. And there are some pretty harrowing stories. We had a woman tell she was driving her mother to church, and she turned into the church parking lot and didn't put a blinker on, and her mother, they pulled her out of the church parking lot. She didn't have proper documentation, and her mother was taken away and sent to a detention center in Aurora, Colorado. There was a group of women who were on their way to their next house cleaning assignment, and it just so happened that the house that they were cleaning was one of our parishes. And 3 of the women were detained and taken away. And the only reason we knew it is because the pastor was able to call and say, hey, this happened. How do we assist? So I think, those are some of the things that are happening to our community members, and those are just the stories that we know about. But we're working really determinedly with our local communities in and around the state to piece these stories together and to figure out how people are being affected. And as Brian, even though he had to just hop off, it's affecting the mental health as he was speaking of so clearly. Some people are for the 287 agreements, some people are against them, and our goal is to continue to find ways to ensure that people's dignity is being upheld. We know that that's a God-given gift. It's not assigned by humans, it's not assigned by governments, but it's certainly something that we as a church work to uphold and make sure that people find value in. Did that address the 287 question, Kevin?
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then the last part, I think, yeah, Bishop Stephen on Mercy Sunday, April 12th, issued Be a Merciful Neighbor. It just so happened that there was a group of Catholic Charities directors that were gathering in Jackson Hole where he was disseminating and promulgating the pastoral letter there. It was a really joyful day for a lot of us that were gathered there. Jim was able to be there, and I think probably took home a letter. You're right. It was a lot of people responded to the letter. Some people with joy, and some people with gladness in their hearts, and so grateful that this was being promulgated. And then some people sought clarification, sought they had questions, and
How diplomatic of you.
that USCCB training is coming
Yeah.
in clutch. Bishop Stephen really has modeled just a great way of addressing that. You respond with charity, you respond with correction and redirection to the gospel. And then the final thing that we do is we just remember people in prayer. So we don't shy away from the hard questions. We don't shy away from the clarifications. And we just continue to find ways to engage people. It seems trivial or semantic to say, you can get more people with honey than you can with vinegar, but that's the reality, and we want to make sure that we're exposing people to the heart and the truth of what Catholic teaching and the Catholic Church is saying about these things. So we don't shy away from the conversation, but we don't let the misspoken or misunderstood statement stand uncorrected either. So correction is offered through a lens of charity, and then also just a redirection to the gospel. I mean, it's so clear in the Gospels how we're supposed to respond. So that's kind of how things are getting dealt with there. Um,
Thank you. Thank you. We have to move on. We're running out of time, but we appreciate uh, your responses. Just to note to the participants, we may go a few minutes over so that we get to everyone. So just wanted to let you know that. I wanted to turn to Kimberly now. Kimberly, you have several questions in the chat. Basically along the lines of what resources you provide to immigrants and what training you provide to volunteers. Could you talk to that real quick?
Of course. So, we do offer, or volunteers that are interested, they have to go through like a 2-hour orientation training before they sign up, for their first shift. So that's something that's mandatory. And then weekly, they are sent, like updates that maybe we have noticed at the core or volunteers have brought up, like, hey, we noticed this. So that's something that we send out via flock note. So hopefully that answers the training part. So as far as the Pope Francis Center, we offer free legal consultations, referrals to community resources. So information such as like diaper banks, food banks, medical enrollment, and places that we've heard are around the neighborhood, or if they're not around here, we try to look for free mental health support for them. Because we just opened the center a few months ago, we're actually talking about and exploring the possibility of having a therapist on site. And I think like a big reason for that is we just see families and individuals that are coming to us just like expressing like the need for this, especially those who have recently like got released from detention center. So that's like a new population for us, at least here at the Pope Francis Center. And once again, I think it's because we are a new center that just opened. And then we are actually starting support groups this week for adults, young adults, and youth that have been just impacted with everything that has been going on with immigration, the policies, and all of that.
Um, One question I wanted to ask you on the court accompaniment. Uh, you got a lot of attention nationally for that program, especially when Bishop Fan showed up. But my understanding is you've gotten some pushback in terms of DHS or the court officers issuing citations. And I don't know if that was for vagrancy or for loitering or for whatever the case may be. I know a few people got fines for it. How have you responded to that? Have you been able to work with ICE to overcome that, or how have you responded, or how has the diocese responded to that?
Yeah, so the citation was for loitering, soliciting, and once again, the volunteers are just like in the waiting rooms, praying, in the hallways, standing, praying. So that was a tricky moment for us. But since then, we've just continued to like adapt as like policies and enforcement practices have changed. We've just been very intentional about clarifying our role as like faith volunteers, reviewing with our volunteers the practices, and once again, just like updating them as well, with anything that has been changing at the court. And just, always making sure that we continue to remain respectful of like the court rules while continuing our mission. We've just been so grateful for the leadership of Father Scott Santa Rosa and Bishop Michael Pham. They recently just met with ICE. They had a meeting, and once again, they just let ICE know our purpose as faith volunteers, why we're there, we're not soliciting. Um, and so we've just been so blessed and once again grateful that Bishop Pham and the priests at OLG are willing to meet with ICE and DHS. Mhm.
Just one last question, the same I asked Brian. What's the advocacy component here? Have y'all tried to address the issue of, for example, of ICE taking migrants away from their court hearings without, them having a chance to present their case? Is there room for that type of advocacy, I guess?
Yeah, I think because we are, Faith is also collaborating with San Diego Organizing Project, which is a project that does a lot of policy work. So that has been very helpful. And I think just through like our presence at the courts, we witness firsthand the challenges immigrants face. We see detentions happen a few feet away from us. And like through those experiences, we are able to educate our community, our parish communities. Our volunteers are not just from Our Lady of Guadalupe, but they're from many churches, many faiths, and here in San Diego County, so it's nice that they're able to take this information, up in Carlsbad and Sinitas and Isidro, so it doesn't stay here just in San Diego, but it's like really spread across the county. Um, and I think, it all just also means being present, listening, documenting on our chats, what we observe, building the relationships, and just helping connect people with like trusted legal resources, community resources. So yeah.
Kimberly, thank you so much, and thanks for all the work that you and your colleagues and all the volunteers do in San Diego. You've inspired us. Um, Last but not least, I'm going to turn to Jim. Seems like an hour ago that we last talked. Um, just a quick question. I know you talked about the witness and the accompaniment that the diocese has done, but there's a social care aspect to what the diocese is doing too in terms of outreach to families, and providing support to immigrant communities, materially and otherwise. Could you talk a little bit about that aspect of your work?
Yeah, sure. That's a central component of what is done in my office. I'm in the diocese. I'm not a separate organization, a separate Catholic Charities organization. I'm the Secretary for Catholic Charities and Social Ministry. So in many ways, this is what we're explicitly called to do, and specifically because we're a church's field hospital, right? So we need to address these needs immediately. Um, we're very fortunate that we stand really in direct support of the pastors. We've always said that our office is there to serve them. If I've ever been meeting a priest, that's the first thing you'll hear out of my mouth. So over the years, we've kind of earned their trust and built relationships, and the pastors know that they can come to us. And just a couple of anecdotes, I guess, really kind of explain how we're helping people in the diocese. The first one, just a couple of months ago, I was called into one of our offices, and there was a young mom who was sitting in a chair, and she's crying. Her husband had gotten picked up a day or two before, the Guatemalan immigrants. He got knocked around pretty good when he was getting picked up, so she was very upset with that. It was the end of the month. The rent was due. The utility bill was due. The kids were hungry. She had and there was three kids and didn't know where to turn. And a lot of times, especially in the state of Rhode Island, I'm sure it is where you all are too. When people are in need, they turn to the church, right? Um, and I said to her, I said, we're going to help you out with your rent. We're going to help you out with food and this electricity bill. And because she didn't know if she was going to deport or try and fight what was going on. I said, this will just give you a little time to breathe. We talked about the mental health aspect throughout this call. This allowed her to at least give her time to think about what was happening. And just recently, I had another pastor who brought a couple to my office, husband and wife. Husband is a naturalized citizen. She's been in the country for over 30 years. They've got three children. They are loyal churchgoers. Their children, one of the three had graduated from the high school recently, and she had a deportation hearing set for July 6th. So this is just last week. They had no attorney. So we were able to connect them with an attorney. We were able to provide through a community program that we've started here in Rhode Island with some different agencies to provide some funds towards that attorney. And Bishop Bruce wrote a letter of support on her behalf to the judge, which we've done on a couple of occasions now. Very happy to say that on Tuesday or Monday rather, the last week, her hearing was postponed until October, so that gives a little bit of hope that this might be something that'll allow her to stay in our country. Uh, Last thing I just want to mention too, because we talk about the difficulties people are going through. There was a family that I was working with at Christmas time. Husband, wife, five kids. They owned a home. They're hard workers. Well, he travels to Boston. He was traveling to Boston every day to work. She was picked up, and their five children went with her back to Guatemala again. And again, it was Christmas time. It was Christmas week. I'm sitting in his home, his off rather his living room, and we were talking. And I said, "Hey, I know it's got to be really tough to be separated from your family at Christmas time. I think with something each one of us on this call would be devastated." And he said to me something that I'll probably remember forever. He said he was sad, but he accepted it because it's what God wanted for him and his family at that time. And that just washed over to me, and I was and I remain very envious of his great faith. These are our brothers and sisters in faith, and that's something we got to remember. I know there was a question in the chat box earlier. Someone had asked me directly about where this tradition comes from in the Bible, and it comes directly from Matthew 25:35. I was a stranger. It's baked into our DNA as church. If you look in the Old Testament, if you look at the stories of Genesis, you look at Deuteronomy, our people wandered. We were strangers for so long. And then we're told in Deuteronomy that when strangers come to our land, we're to call them citizens. And I think that really wraps a bow tie on this whole conversation.
Thanks, Jim. We're at the top of the hour. I wanted to, for any of the past, did you have a closing remarks you want to make? Genevieve, I'm sorry. I felt like I cut you off there. Did you want to finish your thought there, or anyone want to leave some words of wisdom for the audience?
Sure, it'll only take 20 minutes. No, I'm kidding.
Go ahead.
No, there's just so many stories I think that I've heard from people and, and even encountered just in my own experience being here. When we host our legal clinics or know your rights trainings, people bring their kids because they don't want to leave them at home. They don't want to leave them with babysitters because they just don't want to be away from their kids because there's just so much vulnerability and they want to make sure that they know where their family is. The other thing that we do is we are specific and we're very clear about hosting these in our parishes because we know that that's a safe place for people to be. And even if people are not practicing Catholics or we don't know who they are as they're walking in, that doesn't matter in the sense of if they're coming and seeking assistance, then we are here for them. And we also have people who are, we have people who are greeters that welcome people as they come into church. And we also have encouragers, we call them, I think is what we're saying, to encourage people to leave. Like if they're coming to just disrupt and to set a tone that's not welcome, then we encourage them to leave and to find another place to congregate because our churches are to be welcoming people and they're here to get specific needs met at the legal clinics and the Know Your Rights trainings. So I guess it's a gamut here.
Great. Thanks, Genevieve. I want to thank all our speakers, Jim, Kimberly, Brian, who left, Genevieve. Thank you all for your time and for your effort and for your initiatives and your commitment. A little editorial note, you can reach us at Catholic Impact at info@catholicimpact.org. That's two M's, IMMpact.org. If you want information, want assistance in your diocese, whatever that might be. We also have some convenings scheduled coming up. If you're in this area, we have one September 17th to 18th in Philadelphia for those who are on the East Coast. That will be at Villanova. We have one on October 3rd in Seattle and October 24th in St. Louis. And you can get information on that at our website, cmsny.org. So thank you all for participating. And this recording will be available, and we'll send up a follow-up email to everyone with some information from each of the speakers. So thank you very much for joining us today.